Hello, this is Hilary Robertson. Welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. This time I'm joined by composer Matthew Puckett, whose film soundtrack, Before I Go, is out now to accompany the film, also called Before I Go, which was directed by Eric Schaeffer. Matthew's an award-winning composer for many films shown on television. Before I Go tells the story of a former songwriter who has lost her way and is searching for new meaning in her life. And this is about her looking back on her life. I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Matthew. Hi.
Hi.
Well, welcome to Harmonious World.
Yeah, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
That's all right. This podcast is all about people sharing what they're good at, and this music is beautiful for Before I Go.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that. Thanks.
That's okay. So tell me how you because you've worked with Schaeffer before, haven't you?
I have. I've done about 5 of his films at this point, and all very different. This is the first one that was just a solo piano. Usually it's something more involved.
Right. Am I right in thinking that you're the pianist?
Yes, it's me.
I guessed that you were, but it was that kind of, it wasn't clear in the press release I got, and I thought I'd better ask.
Oh yeah, it is me. Sometimes I have other people play, but I love playing piano myself. And those are all they sort of all grow from improvisation. And I love that very much.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you how much was composed and how much was improvised in the studio.
Well, all of it, when it comes to scoring films, I tend to play along with the picture, depending on what the moments are. I mean, obviously I have a long conversation about what the template's going to be with the director beforehand, but I think improvisation is the centerpiece of all music that I do. It all comes from a place of freedom first,
Yeah, and presumably your response to both Schaeffer's intention, because he both wrote and directed this film, didn't he?
He did.
So I guess that's your starting point, but then you could watch the actual film and be inspired by what's happening in it.
Exactly. Yeah. And this film is very much about one character. It's not about situations as much. It's really about speaking to her character, her personality, and her struggle. She's really dealing with some pretty terrible things. So that informed it quite a bit.
Yeah. I'm interested to know, so you've got 1, 2, 4, 6, 7 tracks. Do they play, because I haven't seen the film, I'm afraid, but that I didn't need to see the film in a way, because I know the premise of it, which is it's about this songwriter who's looking back over her life.
Yeah.
And in a way, the tracks, I listened to them in order actually, but they sort of convey something of this nostalgia.
Yes, absolutely. I kind of thought of it too in a way that perhaps they could be songs without lyrics in a way, because she's a songwriter and she's lost her way and she stopped writing. So she's sort of stumbling into, she's reluctantly looking at her past and having to deal directly with where she is in her life. So yes.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I'm interested by the titles. So the titles of the tracks, are they yours or were they Schaeffer's?
They're my titles. I tend to, I don't know how other composers do it actually. I can't do numbers, because if it's just a number, I can't remember what it is. So I just title things right away that either are part of the dialogue, maybe something someone says, or what they're doing. So Sidewalks, for example, she's on the sidewalk at that point. So that's kind of obvious, I guess. But then other ones are just sort of the impression of what it feels like to me. That way I can remember what's what.
Right.
Otherwise I I can't keep track. You know, that's only 7 pieces. There's probably 15 pieces in the actual film.
Right. One of my favorites is light beams.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think that conveys the idea of light coming down somehow. I don't know how it does it, but it does. There's almost, you can see that. Maybe it's because I knew that that's what it was called, but that definitely comes across.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, isn't that amazing with music? I mean, this amazing thing about music is that it's this it makes you feel and makes you see things that aren't there. It's really quite magical in that way. It's and piano for me, it's my favorite instrument. I also play guitar and I was a drummer when I was younger. But I find that piano, because of the expansiveness of the instrument, that it can really describe things. It can make you it can put you in the place. So
Yeah,
I appreciate that. Thanks. Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you alluded to, playing other instruments and things. Tell me a little bit about your musical background. Where were you educated? Where did you start your love of music?
I've always played music from a very, very early age. My parents evidently, somebody gave me a set of bongos, and I played them with uh, pencils. So I started rhythmically at the age of like really young, I think 2 or 3, and I had my first kit around 5 or 7. And then after that, I started playing piano. And piano is a percussive instrument. Um, so I would just bang on it until I figured out things that made sense. And my first real teacher was at Diller Quayle in New York City, and she actually encouraged me to improvise. I didn't really like the learning part of it. I mean, I was young, so most kids struggle with
Yeah,
reading music, but that changed my life because she would improvise. We'd have 2 pianos, and she would play something, and then I'd play something, and I think was really where I started to become a songwriter and composer. Um, and then I went to Berklee College of Music, jumping forward years ahead. But I think my real education came just from working with other people and working on films and TV shows and being given parameters and suggestions and having to figure out how that works. That's just the best education. Um,
yeah.
I mean, I studied also with Russell Steinberg out here in Los Angeles, who's a conductor and composer as well. And I learned probably the most from him because it was at a point that I wanted to learn. So I went to
Right,
him for composition. And that was not long ago. That was like 3 or 4 years ago.
right. There's something, I guess, both confining and liberating about writing for the screen, because you've been employed because of your skill and your art, but on the other hand, you also have to comply with what is going on. So that must be
Yeah,
quite interesting.
it is very interesting because your idea is never the idea that's ultimately going to be against the picture. And it's also not their idea. I mean, you get the temp music with temp music. So they put music in there temporarily from usually a very big composer um, that they like, that fits. And that sort of steers you in the right direction. But what's what I always find so incredible is that I come with one thing and the director comes with something. And then if it's a TV show, there's a number of producers who also come. And then there's this other thing that I never thought I would do or would never plan that forces me outside my comfort zone that it usually ends up being pretty good, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've won awards, so it must be okay.
Well, no, it's satisfying, I guess. What I mean is that it fulfills a certain you want it to be the thing that it's supposed to be, and you never know what that is until you've engaged with the people,
Right.
the other
Yeah,
people on the
yeah,
project.
yeah. Right, right.
Yeah.
So when was this recorded? I think it's a fair while ago.
It was before the the end of the world or the
Yeah,
Armageddon time.
Yeah.
It was in 2019,
Right.
and um, and I actually kept, it's funny because I kept writing after I was done with the film, because some of it, I started some of it with loops. I would play a small figure uh, against the picture just on the piano that felt right, and then I would play pieces under that. And sometimes I'd get rid of the loop sometimes and just keep the piano. But it was so enjoyable to play along with myself like that that I just kept writing. So I'm actually going to release another part of it, just music that's really just inspired from that, essentially, because I kept writing through quarantine. Um, so it was a nice way to dive in, into this other improvisatory thing. But the film didn't come out until recently, so it was like I didn't know I didn't know if it was ever gonna see the
Yeah.
light of day. So it's nice that it's out now.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, I think we didn't know what was going to happen, did we, in terms of concerts and live music and cinema and everything. I mean, we were all worried that it was never going to start up again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I miss going to see music more than I miss even playing it with other people.
yeah, I've just been talking to somebody else actually, and saying that there's something about that exchange of energy between audience and performer that we thrive on. I think if you have anything to do with music, if you're in tune with music, that energy it revives you.
Mm-hmm. It does. It feeds you. It
Yeah.
does something. I mean, it's literally vibrations. It affects you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I'm such
Yeah.
a fan of music. I love music so much uh,
Yeah.
that even when I write it, I step back and it just astounds me that it even exists sometimes,
Yeah.
Uh,
I quite often I quite often go back to this thought that, if you think about Beethoven 250 years ago, there are only 12 notes. There are 12 notes. I mean, there are, subtones and quarter tones and all of that sort of stuff, but basically there are 12 notes. And yet every time I listen to a new album or a new track or a new live stream or something, it's new. And how is that possible when there are 12 notes? It's like there are only
I don't know.
26 letters of the alphabet, and yet the potential for the permutations of putting things together is incredible.
It's incredible. And the different genres and all the different
Yeah.
from all over the world
Yeah.
that are so, so, so very different, from jazz to classical to pop to, whatever it might be. It's inexplicable and
Yeah.
beautiful. So beautiful.
Yeah.
That's why
And
I'm always amazed when people say, "Oh, I don't, I don't like this kind of music, or I don't like that, or I really just listen to this." I don't understand.
no, I
I
know
just think that
exactly.
it's endless, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Since starting this podcast, I've realized that I was always determined that I wasn't going to stick to a particular genre. And I've now realized that it's pretty good that I've done that, because there's lots of music that you can't even put in a genre. So I would have missed it if I'd said I'm only going to do classical music, or I'm only going to do jazz, or I'm only going to do pop. I would have missed so much that swirls around between all of that, everything.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
It really is.
it's good that
Really
you're
is.
open that way.
Well, yeah. I've
It's a
always been
wonderful
like
thing.
that. I've always liked listening to different things and taken inspiration from different places and stuff. So fantastic. So you alluded to doing some more composition during lockdown, during this awful pandemic that we're still in. What else? How else has the pandemic hit you, or what's it brought to your life?
Oh, I think that the biggest realization that I had was that I don't want to work alone. I do enjoy working on films and these things that are solitary, but but I swore to myself that when this is over, I was going to play out more. And I also write musical theater. And what's really wonderful about that is that's a very collaborative art form. You're collaborating with not only other musicians, but you're collaborating with the director and a cast. And I've enjoyed that so much because then it's a lot of people. So that was the thing I learned about myself, because I think any composer is introverted to a certain extent, or anybody who, and even people who play music or write different kinds of music are do enjoy being alone and coming up with that. But and I still will do that, but boy, to be only by myself all the time like that, I was like, oh
Yeah.
Going forward, this is going to change. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are the plans for the future then? What have you got
So
coming up?
yeah, the EP, it's an EP that grew out of this this record. I'm gonna release that in December. It's a 4 pieces that are improvisations. And I'm also releasing 2 songs from a musical that I wrote, which is a musical about Albert Einstein.
Oh, okay.
So those are 2 I'm squeezing in before the end of the year. And then I don't know what 2022 will hold. Hopefully we'll all be, going to see shows and hanging out with each other.
Exactly. Let's hope so. Definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Oh, likewise, Hilary. Thank you for inviting me.
I really hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with composer and pianist Matthew Puckett. And at the start of this podcast, you heard Light Beams, and now this is a track called Looking Up. As always, please do check out Matthew's music, and all the links are in the show notes. If you enjoy listening to Harmonious World, please do share it with your friends and family. You can either do that on social media or by sending the link with a personal message. Please also consider leaving a review on whichever podcast platform you listen on. It really does make a difference. Thank you so much for listening to Harmonious World, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Remember to share what you are good at to help make it a more harmonious world. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.